In an unpredictable world, you can't simply wait for change to happen. We created McKinsey Live for leaders like you. Our global experts break down the need to know on the issues that matter most to decision makers and to society. We'll introduce you to leading research, new and transformational ideas, and practical knowledge and strategies, all to empower the changemakers of today, enabling you to step forward boldly, tackle real challenges, and drive change with clarity and purpose. We're helping you take control so you can drive the conversation, so you can lead fearlessly while leaving no one behind, so you can take the reins to create and accelerate growth, so you can build resilience for the future. Together, we can push towards the opportunities of our era. Let's get started now.
McKinsey Live. I'm Lucia Rahilly, McKinsey's editorial director, and your host for today's special event, a preview of the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, which starts this coming Monday, January 20th in Davos, Switzerland. Today's McKinsey Live is a little different from others in this series in that we're not homing in on one specific area of new research. Nevertheless, you can access more on all the topics we'll discuss by visiting our website, mckinsey.com. We'll highlight a few specific pieces of content, but we also have a range of publications covering the key themes that we'll talk about today. And as always, we will take questions from folks in our registered audience, so feel free to use that Q&A bar at the bottom of your live stream to ask whatever's on your mind. We've got a really big group today, really sizable in the audience this time out, a lot of interest in Davos this year, but we will do our best to answer a selection of your questions probably at the end of the presentation. Joining us today to talk about what to expect from Davos 2025 are three of McKinsey's senior-most leaders, Solveigh Hieronimus, Shelley Stewart III, and Lareina Yee. Solveigh is a senior partner based in Germany, and she's a leader in our sustainability and our people and organizational performance practices. She also serves on the council for the McKinsey Global Institute, which is our business and economics research arm, where she focuses her work on European competitiveness and long-term prosperity. Shelley is a senior partner in New York. He serves clients across a range of sectors, including private capital, advanced industries, telecoms, media technology. Shelley is also the global leader of McKinsey's reputation and engagement function, and he is the chair of the McKinsey Institute for Black Economic Mobility, which is our think tank focused on catalyzing cross-sector action to build a more inclusive economy. And Lareina is a senior partner in San Francisco, where she advises companies on growth, organization, and tech-led transformation. Lareina is also the chair of McKinsey's Technology Council, and she's an expert in Gen AI and emerging technologies. I also want to say Lareina hosts a super interesting podcast on tech topics called At the Edge, which folks should immediately subscribe to. If she weren't so busy, she would put me right out of the moderating business. Solveigh, Shelley, and Lareina, welcome to McKinsey Live.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Lucia.
So many thanks to all three of you for making the time to talk today. I recognize this is a very busy time with Davos looming. Let's just start with some context. Thousands of leaders from across the globe are poised to gather on the mountaintop next week in what is slated to be the largest meeting in the history of the World Economic Forum. Lareina, you are a Davos veteran. You will return again this year. Talk to us a bit about the dynamics that you expect to drive the 2025 Davos agenda as distinct from years past. Lareina, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Every year at Davos, there's a specific theme. Hopefully you all can hear me. The benefits of a live show. And this year, it's collaboration in the intelligent age. And when we kind of reflect on why those words specifically, what comes to mind when Solveigh and Shelley and I talk is that there's a lot there's a lot changing in intelligence and collaboration. So one of the topics near and dear to my heart is the way technology changes our ability to express and be intelligent. How does that change us as humans? And for the last 2 years, we've seen ginormous changes in our ability to have machines grow in intelligence and how they work with us to change how we work and live in society. But that's not the only thing that's changing. The other thing that's changing is the basis of collaboration. We have some very practical topics that have and require a different form of collaboration, not just technology, but supply chain. When we think about trade, when we think about a global shift in elections, there are so many topics for which the idea of how do we work together. And the final thing I would say is, even though it's not in the title, I think something under the surface that everyone feels is the pace of change is significantly different. And so all the more reason that we need to spend a couple of days together in diverse groups with different voices, thinking about some of these really important topics.
Great. Thanks, Lareina. It's just so helpful, I think, to have that frame for the event overall. All three of you are obviously talking to CEOs and other senior execs every day. Shelley, what's your view on what will drive leadership discussion at Davos, and which themes will really most anchor leaders amid this kind of complexity and growing these collaborative dynamics that Lareina described?
Absolutely. And thank you again, Lucia, for having us. I'm always excited to be back on, and even more excited because I'm on with two friends. So look, I think Lareina hit on this point of collaborating in the intelligent age. And I think one of the challenges with that collaboration is that the forum and we as a firm also acknowledge that this is a bit the age of fragmentation, where we have a world order that is quite connected but contested in many ways. And so the core question becomes, how do we as leaders navigate this challenge, whether it be in the private, public, or social sector? And how do we navigate it all in the context of some really complicated things like reimagining growth with the world around fragmentation, and with some of the demographic trends that are going on? There are some real challenges and questions about how you grow as institutions. How do we safeguard the planet? How do we invest in our people? And so there are some themes that we have kind of distilled down for our core discussion drivers over the course of our time at Davos. So some of them are kind of really prominent on the CEO agenda, almost no matter where you are. One is just, how do you lead in the 21st century in the context of all these things that we've been mentioning? The second is a topic that will continue to gain steam, and Lareina made reference to it, and she's an expert here, is AI transformation, and what does that actually really mean in practice? And then geopolitics and resilience, as we said. So those are kind of three that we think are CEO agenda items, almost regardless of sector. I think there are a couple of topics that we're really excited about that have implications for society at large. One of them is women's health, which we'll talk more about later on, and why that's so critically important to the global economy, but also to individual countries and even institutions. And the second is the energy transition. And now, obviously, climate change has been on the WEF agenda for a long time now. The question that we're really focusing on is the how. How do you do it in a practical way? What are the trade-offs? And so we'll talk a bit about that. And then lastly, there are other topics that are relevant maybe to a smaller set of industries, but they're high growth, they're interesting, they could be boons to productivity. And so one of the areas that we're leaning into is the space economy and its relevance in certain sectors like ag and logistics and others. So these are some of the things that we're really excited about. We've got a number of publications that we're going to put out over the course of the next week or so on resilience and geopolitics, the energy transition, and some other work around industries in the intelligent age. So very excited about all those things.
Thanks, Shelley. That's great. Let's move now to get into a little bit more detail about these 6 areas that you just outlined and why they're so pivotal to global leaders. And let's start with what maybe was the hottest topic of the past 18 months, and that is AI. Lareina, massive investment last year in AI as leaders look to harness the promise of fast and potentially transformative innovation. Again, as the leader of our tech council, you are steeped in the ways that AI and other emerging technologies are converging to accelerate productivity and reshape the way we work. Talk to us about what's next on the horizon for CEOs who are integrating AI into their strategic agenda for 2025. Again, muted, sorry.
It's a huge topic. And I think that we have to start with what is the long-term value here. When we think about AI and we see it in the news, we are using the tools each day, all of us. What is the long-term value? And one of the things that we've done is we've sized that to be about $4.4 trillion of economic productivity value. And that is actually, larger than the size of the UK economy. That's not something that we're going to get over the next 1 or 2 years. That's something that happens over the next decades. But, from an economic perspective, this is a profound opener. It's a profound way in which we change the frontiers of possibility from an economy perspective. From a technology perspective, and for someone like me who's grown up in Silicon Valley over the last 2.5 decades, this is one of the most exciting technology shifts. But with all of that said, the focus of the conversation at Davos and what I'm hoping we'll discuss is actually the business leadership. And hopefully my internet, one of the transformative technologies of 42 years ago, hopefully that will stay and work for this session. But one of the things that we know is that the technology is moving at an unprecedented pace, that speed that I talked about first. I mean, in the last year itself, we've seen unbelievable leaps in multimodal, the idea that you could use all 5 senses of your, of how you listen, see, hear, even smell with these technologies. We've seen huge changes in the ability of intelligence, even reasoning, which is like this next level. And if you're a scientist, you're a physicist, or you're an engineer, like that is incredibly difficult. We've also seen one of the most exciting things personally that I've seen this year is the advent of agents, or agentic AI, which is the ability not just to summarize, but to take action. So on the technology front, it feels like almost every month we're seeing these breakthroughs. So the technology isn't the question. I mean, that's more just catching up to what we've invented. The question against how we get to the 4.4 trillion is, what is the business moment? What is the business transformation? And that's what we're not doing as well. And so I do really hope we talk about this at Davos. And just to put a finer point to it, what this slide shows is about 11% of pilots have successfully scaled. I'm going to put an even more extreme set of numbers on a report that we're issuing in 2 weeks after Davos, which is that over the next 2 to 3 years, 93% of companies said that they are going to invest and increase their investment in AI. But of those, only 1% believe that they are mature on the AI maturity scale. So asking a little slightly harder question than have you scaled, which is the 11%, but asking, are you mature? Because only when you are mature do you start to see those productivity benefits come in at a scale and magnitude and a sustained way that really changes your business performance. So herein lies a bit of the challenge, which is a business challenge, that it's not that the technology isn't ready. And the other thing we're going to talk about in our report is it's not that the employees are holding you back. In fact, employees are 3 times more likely than their leaders to believe and think that over the next couple of years, AI will significantly transform their day-to-day work. So if I kind of sum it up, the reason why this is a business challenge is because employees are prepared. They may not like it, but they are prepared for the change. The technology is more than prepared. The question is, are leaders prepared to actually take big steps forward to reimagine how they construct work, how they construct getting things done, how they redefine their business models with the capabilities of this technology? And that's not just a business discussion, that's a holistic discussion, which is one of the benefits of Davos, is it's not just a business meeting, it's a global leaders meeting, it's a policy set of leaders, it's a set of nonprofit leaders. And so I'm really looking forward to this.
Super interesting. Interested in hearing more about that after the fact, after Davos has passed. Let's keep moving. AI is an interesting segue to geopolitics and this question of our global interconnectedness. Obviously a classic theme for Davos, but probably particularly top of mind now, given the shifting geopolitical landscape. On the one hand, technology means the world is in some ways much more connected, as you described, than ever before. So our global flows research shows a pretty big uptick in cross-border flows of intangible assets. So data flows, for example, have grown by nearly 50% annually over the past 2 decades. But on the other, obviously, leaders are navigating what is a more multipolar, a riskier, a more unpredictable geoeconomic environment vis-a-vis supply chain, trade corridors, talent footprint, and so forth. Shelley, you use the term fragmentation and WEF's descriptor of this particular moment as the age of fragmentation. What should CEOs be thinking about as they confront what appears to be a new world order?
That's exactly right. I mean, this is a complicated moment for CEOs, and that may be an understatement. We know from our quarterly economic outlook survey that geopolitical tensions have been at the top of the agenda or the biggest concern with respect to growth for some time now, given some of the conflicts that have been going on for the last couple of years. What we saw spike up from September to December, and a lot of it in the context of what's going on in the US, is a doubling. So 50% of survey respondents are quite concerned about trade policy and what that will do to economic growth. So you've seen a real uptick there. And by the way, rightfully so. I mean, just if you look at the trajectory of this, we've seen a 12x surge in trade interventions globally since 2010, 6x surge in tariffs exchanged between the US and China. So it is not unfounded, that concern. And so we just published some research on the geometry of trade. And the reality of it is we will remain a dense web of interconnections. And broadly, or if I had to generalize, I think those connections have brought a lot of benefits, including economic growth, efficiency, reduced prices in some sector, increased availability of goods. And there are a bunch of challenges that we face globally that are going to require continued cooperation. And so the question becomes, how do we rethink and redefine new forms of cooperation on things that we can find common ground on? And so tactically, a few things. One, you're actually seeing organizations get more serious about geopolitics and scenario planning and having dedicated leadership capacity to this topic. And you're seeing things happen, right? Many Chinese manufacturers have moved production or some production to ASEAN countries. You're seeing developing economies now account for the majority of China's imports and exports. That's a major shift. And European economies, in many instances, have moved away from trade with Russia and increased trade with other partners. So you're seeing these disruptions. They create risks, but they also create opportunities. And so I think a lot of the conversation will be around this in Davos.
Okay. Let's turn now to one of the themes, Shelley, you described as being for our collective benefit, for the good of society at large, and that's safeguarding the planet. We've certainly talked about the energy transition at past WEF gatherings and the need to move more quickly to achieve net zero emissions. Solveigh, how do you see climate factoring into the Davos discussions this year?
Yeah, Lucy, as you said, the topic of climate and an underlying energy transition has been on the agenda for years. There's like dedicated tracks on WEF historically on climate. I think one of the most moving sessions in conference I remember to this day was the one on planetary boundaries. It was in main Congress Hall, and people were in tears with 2 scientists actually presenting the planetary boundaries and how we're crossing them and how irreversible this is. So it's also the beauty of Davos having science so central to some of the global issues, with then the global leaders around to actually debate them and apply. As Shelley was saying actually in the opening, we chose our themes very deliberately. in terms of how do we want to focus and spend our time with other leaders in Davos, and also how does this align to the forum agenda this year. And we chose energy transition deliberately because we think it almost sits at the nexus. It sits in between two of the core pillars the forum chose to put on a program, which we've seen at the outset. And one continues to be safeguarding the planet. I mean, climate change unarguably is one of the largest challenges of humanity. We see it all over right now as well. So I think it's critical that it stays on the agenda. However, we think it will take a different flavor in this year's meeting. And it has taken a bit of the different flavor over the course of the last probably year, 18 months, because there's other factors than reducing emissions. While this is still critical if we want to stay within planetary boundaries and safeguard the planet, we do think energy transition has more complexities around it. And this is also how we see CEOs think about it, grapple with it. Because if you think about purely emissions reduction, you're missing really a big part of the picture, what's actually moving discussions these days in boardrooms, but frankly, also on the street, which is then also the reliability of energy. It's like not just like the cleanness of the reliability of energy throughout, the affordability of energy. What does it do when we do an energy transition? What does it do to corporate balance sheets, to industries? What does it do actually to households and prices? And we've all seen what happens when like prices are moving, like people are influenced by it. So energy is such a critical topic also in terms of affordability. And last but not least, and that fits very nicely, Shelley, to the previous point on geopolitics again, competitiveness of regions. If you think about energy being such a central input factor into industries, not just manufacturing ones, but then back to Lareina, also the link to the whole data centers, like the energy need of that. So affordability of energy, and therefore then also competitiveness of entire like regions, industries, hang so hyper complexly together that we think this will be a theme that will take up a lot of space, rightfully so. And a meeting like Davos in a week like Davos is so perfect to unpack such a complex issue with so many interdependencies, as you see it also across the agenda we're debating with you right now, and hopefully inch a bit closer to the solution from the why this is important. I hope we're all there still, to the how are we actually going to do this. And on the how, maybe just allow me to highlight one more dimension of this after going through those four complexities I think we need to do, is the role of capital. We always like to have the right people at the table and ask ourselves, what are the levers? What's missing puzzle for the solution, if you will? And capital allocation and the role of capital in that transition, actually to clean, reliable, affordable, and ultimately competitive energy, it will need a significant amount of capital, and private capital very specifically. So we're dimensionalizing this also with partners around it, hosting a couple of private events also around the role of capital in some of the world's biggest challenges. So we're quite proud of that, and we hope we can like be part of a productive conversation on how to allocate the right capital in a productive, competitive way in order to boost that transition. We're also launching together with the forum a climate transition impact framework, also together with other partners throughout the week. This will be quite an interesting thought piece, we think, and we hope we're going to have a look once this is launched this week.
Yeah, thanks, Solveigh. And again, that will be available on our website. Let's move to the next, mindful of time, also of collective benefit for society at large. One of the pieces of McKinsey research that resonated really strongly last year, as I recall, was on women's health and closing the gap between the state of affairs for women and their male counterparts health-wise. Solveigh, what's new on that topic? Any developments for 2025 there?
Yes. Look, this is a topic we're just very proud of. Also, again, in that spirit of what are the topics that are being discussed in any case, and what are the ones leaders should be discussing, and therefore that should be on the agenda. And this topic also, again, in partnership with the World Economic Forum, we did a report that frankly blew our expectations in terms of relevance and success by far last year. It was a topic that was so widely discussed by several of our terrific colleagues, and it's squarely on the agenda still. And rightfully so. I mean, women are 50% of the world's population. We live on average 5 years younger. Yet in those living years, we're on average 25% less well, or spend like 25% more time in not good health. And that's not like just an individual and collective societal question. That's actually an economic question. And as you rightly see there on this page, we think it's a 1 trillion annual opportunity. Last year, we talked a lot about the figure and the opportunity. So like, where does it come from? Where is it driven by? Women being more like productive in work in their communities and having less time off and driving more like growth for themselves in their communities. This year, we're launching a new and a follow-on piece we're equally excited about, which is about then how do you actually capture this? Like, what are actually the conditions? How do you go after it? How do you actually make that 1 trillion a reality? And that, again, is such a Davos topic because it's a complex topic. It's thorny, it's interrelated. It will need many, many actors, as Lareina was saying, from policy to CEOs to investors to activists, to actually come together in a structured way and inch this forward. And when we're back next year and debating this topic, I hope we'll also have made tremendous progress together on this one. So very much looking forward to those two.
Thanks, Solveigh. Shelley, you mentioned leadership at the top of this. Obviously, most of the dynamics we've been discussing do affect the skills necessary to thrive in the workforce at all levels, including at the top, including for leaders. How should CEOs be thinking about investing in their own people? In other words, how should they be thinking about developing the leadership capabilities necessary to advance the trajectories of high potential talent within their organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we feel pretty strongly that the CEO agenda is only expanding and becoming more complicated, as we said. We estimate that roughly the number of critical issues at a given time versus 10 years ago has roughly doubled. So it is becoming quite complicated. And investing in human capital is long been a relevant issue for leaders. But we also find that many companies don't do it that well, right? This idea of building resilient high performers who can be part of a succession plan. And if you weren't doing it well in a world that was changing more slowly than the world today, then the imperative only increases and the challenge only increases. And many of these skills that are going to be needed or experiences for navigating and outperforming, frankly, in an uncertain environment are not ones that are taught in courses or even traditional leadership programs. And so there's a big reimagining going on in this space. The place that we're really pushing our CEOs and our clients is to think about their institutions as leadership factories, right? How are you building and cultivating as many high-level leaders in the organization as possible? And so that requires a few different things. The CEO becoming a part-time chief talent officer and really investing their own individual time and energy, often down maybe even 2 or 3 levels, to make personal connections and investments in high performers who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. There are real questions around scale and how you kind of institutionalize and operationalize this leadership factory. And there are some good examples of institutions that have done well, and we'll continue to kind of share our research and thinking on this. And then the third thing is just ensuring that there's a process to step back and revisit the performance management system to ensure that you're actually the feedback mechanisms are in place and the incentives and the core value proposition exists to actually attract, support, you retain the folks that you want for the 21st century. And so these are some of the things that we're very focused on. And I think many leaders will be focused on this as well.
Thanks, Shelley. One last theme we want to fit in before we close, not a conventionally broad leadership topic, but super fun and innovative, and that is space. Lareina, why space? Why are we focusing on the space economy this year at Davos?
Call me a traditionalist and able to get off mute live. I think part of the magic of Davos and our participation is to provoke, to help dream about things around the corner. And for me personally, one of the things I always take away from Davos is the ability to learn. And so I think space really touches those elements of our participation in Davos, which is space is an ultimate dream. I mean, think about exploring frontiers beyond Earth. And quite frankly, there have been amazing advancements. 2024 was a banner year for space exploration in terms of what SpaceX did, which is probably most prominent. But if we think about the advancement of satellite technology, our capabilities to truly do scientific research outside of our planet. And then I think one of the most profound things is that not only is the pure exploration and science of this unbelievably interesting, but it has enormous practical applications and accelerates the things that we're able to do on Earth. And so one of the numbers you see here is that it's a greater than $2 trillion value opportunity by 2035, so over the long term. But let me take that into something practical. Space technology helps us with our satellite capabilities. It may help us, we don't know yet, solve last mile connectivity. There's still enormous proportion of our population in the United States, in the global South, in Europe. There are places where internet doesn't get all the way there. And that is your portal to all these exciting things like AI. Moreover, some of the everyday applications we use, like Uber, for example, are powered by some of the technology innovations in the race for space. So this is one where it's a moment to dream and learn. And that's part of the dialogue at Davos. And that's also how we want to show up. We want to be able to engage on the topics that the forum has focused on and developed real research and is convening, but we also want to bring some new ideas. Solveigh mentioned women's health, space is another one, 21st century leadership, really always questioning how do we show up as leaders.
Thank you, Lareina. Okay, that brings us to time, but this has been such a great discussion. Solveigh, Shelley, and Lareina, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It was great to have you. We're actually out of time for questions, but you will be able to find a replay of this and our previous McKinsey Live sessions at mckinsey.com/live. You can also visit our website to subscribe to McKinsey's Davos Daily, which is a short-run email series on some of these key topics on the leadership agenda at WEF. And we will also have a dedicated web page for Davos updates, and you can find links to that page in the chat. Look in the chat right now, and you should be able to access those links. Also, all is not lost. You will have another shot at questions in a couple of weeks when we will host a debrief on what actually materialized at Davos, the highs, the lows, the woe, the intrigue, everything that happened that mattered on the meeting at the meeting on the mountaintop. So be sure to join our next McKinsey Live on Tuesday, January 28th, just following WEF. See you there. Have a great day or evening, and be well.